Good evening, mysterious minds of the interwebs. I'm Alexa, the resident ooky spooky girly, and today we're back talking about one of the biggest unknowns, space. Okay, well, to be more specific, space stations. For reference, the International Space Station, or ISS, is the largest modular space station in low Earth orbit, and houses 5 space agencies. The United States' NASA, Russia's Roscosmos, Japan's JAXA, Europe's ESA, and Canada's CSA. The station is primarily divided into 2 sections. The Russian Orbital Segment, or ROS, which is operated by Russia, while the United States Orbital Segment is run by the United States as well as other countries. The Russian segment includes 6 habitable modules, and the US segment includes 7 habitable modules, whose support services are distributed around 76.6% for NASA, 12.8% for JAXA, 8.3% for ESA, and 2.3% for CSA. I swear that's all going to be relevant today. And speaking of which, welcome to the top 5 mysterious events at the International Space Station. Number 5, the suspicious drilling hole. In 2018, astronauts realized that the ISS was losing air pressure, and after investigating, discovered that someone had drilled a tiny hole in the Soyuz MS-09 capsule, which created more concern. Why would anyone drill a hole in the spacecraft that had transported astronauts to the ISS and back to Earth? The crew sealed the damage with tape and epoxy, and thankfully the air pressure normalized. Afterwards, the astronauts tried and failed to solve the mystery, but not because nobody knew what had happened. Anyone want to take a guess who knows what happened? No, not the Catholic Church, you jokers, and not the US government either. Russia knew and refused to say anything. The Soyuz shuttle belonged to Roscosmos, which is the state corporation of the Russian Federation responsible for space flights, cosmonautics programs, and aerospace research. After an investigation, the Russian Space Agency developed a severe case of zipped lips, which I would love to say is a shock or surprise, but I've promised to never lie to y'all. The head of Roscosmos did say, "We know exactly what happened, but we won't tell you anything," while speaking to youngsters at a science conference, which is a wild thing to say in my opinion. For safety reasons, NASA would really like to know who drilled the hole in the shuttle. Like, did it happen on Earth or after the craft docked at the ISS? They can't examine the shuttle for themselves because it burned up in the atmosphere, and Roscosmos remains silent. Wow, Russians being secretive on something? Once again, totally flabbergasted from a country with a former KGB agent in charge. Number 4, finding a new species. Before someone gets excited, not an alien species. Well, I have been paying close attention to the David Grush testimonies, and more lately, this isn't that. If you haven't been paying attention to Congress lately, I'd recommend pausing me, researching that, and then we can chat after. Between 2011 and 2016, scientists collected samples from different places in the ISS. 4 of the samples contained mysterious microbes. 3 revealed a new species that was found, among, other places on the dining table, while others came from a research station and an air filter. The 4th was a known microbial species named Mytholorubrum rhodesianum. I tried my best with that, I swear. Pronunciations are hard when videos don't exist saying the words. All 4 were different strains, but they were all related to bacteria on Earth that live in fresh water and soil. More specifically, a group of bacteria that fights off plant diseases and helps foliage to grow. The ISS crew has been growing food for years, and this might have something to do with finding the microbes on the station. A closer study of the unknown species, now named Mytholobacterium ajmali, showed that all 3 strains encourage healthy growth in roots and shoots. Since they can clearly survive in space, the microbes are particularly useful for veggie gardens up there. Hey, it's good to know they all have access to a garden. Number 3, 1997 fire. Time to travel back to 1997, the year I was born. On February 24th, the 6 crew members aboard the Russian space station Mir faced significant danger when a fire ignited in an oxygen generating system. The searing flame, lasting several minutes, not only cut off access to one of the 2 Soyuz escape vehicles, but also filled the station's modules with smoke. So, fun fact, fire behaves different in microgravity. It stays put rather than spreading. A kind of plasma bubble that burns hotter and hotter, producing blinding smoke that can swiftly blanket a cabin. The oxygen generator went on burning and spewing blobs of molten metal until finally burning out when all of its fuel was exhausted. Although the narrow confines where the fire occurred made fighting it difficult, the crew prevailed and extinguished the flames with no damage to the station's overall structure. The station's life support systems cleared its atmosphere of the toxic smoke over several hours, with no lasting harm to the crew members. The space station normally housed a resident crew of 3, but because this was during a handover from one long-duration crew to another, the crew size had grown to 6 for the short period of time. This involved Russian cosmonauts Valery and Alexander K, who had been on board since the previous August and were nearing the end of their long-duration mission, and NASA astronaut Jerry, who arrived aboard the space shuttle Atlantis in January, and were joined by the newly arrived trio of Vasily and Alexander of Roscosmos and Reinhold of the German space agency DLR. I swear introducing everyone was necessary, or else I wouldn't have bothered with looking up how to pronounce all their names. gas. Shortly after dinner, as Alexander activated a solid fuel oxygen generator in Mir's Cavant 1 module, the canister ignited, shooting a 3-foot flame with sparks and bits of molten metal across the module and generating a large quantity of dense smoke. The flame belonged to the evacuation route to the Soyuz spacecraft docked at the one end of Cavant 1, the vehicle Valerie, Alexander, and Reinhold would use in an emergency evacuation. The crew quickly donned their oxygen masks, and Valerie began dousing the flame with foam from a fire extinguisher as Jerry held him in place and the other crew members handed him 2 more extinguishers. The flame finally extinguished itself, with Valerie's efforts preventing significant damage, although some of Cavant 1's panels were charred. Over the next several hours, the station's life support system cleared the smoke, and life returned to normal aboard Mir following the worst in-orbit fire incident in the history of spaceflight. During normal Mir operations, the 3 resident crew members' oxygen needs were met by 2 electron oxygen generating units. The units, also now used aboard the International Space Station, generated oxygen through the electrolytic splitting of water, primarily reclaimed from sources aboard the station. When a larger crew inhabited Mir, solid fuel oxygen generators, also known as Vika or by the Russian acronym TGK, supplemented the electrons. Used for decades aboard Soviet and Russian submarines, and for years aboard their space stations, SFOGs burned canisters of solid lithium perchlorate that chemically generated oxygen. Each canister provided enough oxygen to support 1 crew member per day. Although used without incident more than 2,500 times aboard Mir, on this day, the canister just decided, nah, I'm not gonna do my job. Astronauts returned the damaged generator on the next space shuttle mission for evaluation, but the extensive damage made analysis kinda difficult. After 2 years of study, investigators determined that the latex glove mixed with the canister was the cause. So while we might know the actual cause now, it was definitely a weird mystery at the time. In number 2, the first space crime. So in 2019, astronaut Anne McClain was accused of committing the first ever space crime. According to her estranged wife, Summer Warden, McClain tried to hack her bank account using the computers aboard the ISS. So McClain acknowledged that she had access to the bank account from space, insisting through a lawyer that she was merely shepherding the couple's still intertwined finances. She was going through quite the separation from Warden when Warden freely spoke to reporters, and McClain faced a career-ending charge and also became, the first active astronaut to be outed for her sexuality. Summer Warden painted the astronaut as a space hacker, but before long, Warden herself was charged for making false statements to federal authorities. Warden claimed she had taken measures to keep McClain out of this particular bank account, which McClain then attempted to hack. However, an investigation found that Warden had never taken any steps to lock McClain out of the account. At the time, McClain was gaining national attention for another reason, but a historically good one. NASA was promoting the coming milestone of an all-female spacewalk, with McClain set to do work outside the space station. But in a sudden switch a few days before the spacewalk, NASA scrapped McClain's role, explaining that there were not enough suits available. A NASA spokesperson, Megan Summer, said the decision about the spacewalk was not influenced by any allegations about McClain and declined to comment about the other issues raised by Ms. Warden. Warden has since been charged with lying about the alleged offense. Go figure. Number 1, 2020 breakdowns. I think we can all agree that 2020 was a crappy year for everyone here on Earth, but it turns out that even astronauts were having a brutal time up in isolation. The stations that are around 20 years old are starting to show their age, and malfunctions included a persistent air leak and the breakdown of a critical life support system. And one cosmonaut has said that the Russian modules in particular were exhausted. Roscosmos reported cosmonauts had repaired their oxygen generator, which is a key life support system in the Zvezda module. The system failed as a Soyuz spacecraft arrived and increased the crew to 6. Where have I said that before? But it was working again the next day, and a second oxygen generator in America's Destiny module kept working normally. In addition, the air already inside the ISS contains enough breathable oxygen for about several weeks. Another problem on the ISS, a pesky little air leak that began in September of 2019, had finally been fixed at the time, so things seemed like they were looking up. One of the folks on board found the source of the leak by observing the trajectory of a floating tea bag within the Zvezda module. The temporary fix consisted of some foam rubber and a duct tape-like strip known as Kapton tape. I'm fully aware it's a heck of a lot more durable, but the similarities are way too funny. A similar fix was used in 2018 for a different ISS leak, while experts were working on a more long-term solution, and I think they still are. Once that got fixed, the next problem to come about was a broken toilet that was also located in the Russian segment. Cosmonaut Anatoly Ivashinishin reported the problem to ground controllers, who suspected the issue was an air bubble that formed in the system, and thankfully it was able to be fixed. Had it not been fixed, however, the cosmonauts could have relieved themselves in a toilet located in their Soyuz MS-16 spacecraft, which is currently docked to the ISS. Failing that, they could have politely asked NASA for access to its fancy $23 million toilet, the Universal Waste Management System. A potentially more serious problem emerged later the same evening when the Russian oxygen supply system broke down once again. So the water used to generate the oxygen had run out. But, like the toilet, this problem was evidently also fixed. For reference, the Electron VM oxygen supply system is one of 2 on the ISS, the other being NASA's Environmental Control and Life Support System, ECLSS. NASA's system can sustain the 6-member crew, and there are spare oxygen tanks available should things go really bad. And if that wasn't enough to make anyone curse out Murphy's Law, an oven used to warm up food also broke down. Because of course, no one's gonna want comfort food or anything after that series of chaos. According to a Russian news agency, all problems were resolved over the course of the night. Maybe it's time for extreme home makeover, ISS edition. Just an idea. And that brings us to the end of our time, and I'm good with living, with the unknowns on Earth. Really, I am. No need to explore space for me. Let me know if y'all enjoyed today's videos, and if you did, could you help us out by giving it a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hitting the bell for more spacey stuff from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.